team up. And this is pretty awesome. We didn't know if there would be 4 people or this many. This tells me that Chester County needs seed funding and more support for early stage ideas, which is what Walnut Street Labs is all about. Walnut Street Labs is an innovation lab. We create innovation kind of for ourselves through our incubator. We create innovation for the community through a lot of our programs and free events. And we create innovation for our clients. That include small businesses, like Unisys, Aetna, some other pharmaceutical companies. So we have been talking and working with Ben Franklin for a year, and we formalized our partnership, and this is part of that, to bring more resources and education to the community. So that's really all I want to say. I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Thanks for coming. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you. And there's going to be a Q&A period, and
yeah, great audience today. Thank you. I apologize for being late. Traffic was crazy. I'm going to do 2 things. I have copies of the presentation with me, so if you want to take notes on the slide deck, that's an easy thing to do. If you want, we'll send you an electronic copy of the slide deck as well, but I have a sign-in sheet. Just put a note on the sign-in sheet, say, please send me the electronic version. Okay, so if you want, we'll pass these around. I think there's enough. Hopefully there is enough. So it's an easy way to take notes. I'll pass around the sign-in sheet. Again, it's great for us to have the information, but it's also really important. If you want an electronic copy of this, sign in and make sure you just note that. And I think there's a bunch of these. There's only room for 3 on each sheet, so I'm going to pass you the whole sheet. After you finish, just flip it around to the back side. So let me give this here. Let me just and if I get just a temperature of the room, is everybody here honestly looking for capital? Who's looking for capital? You're always looking for capital. Okay. Who just is here just to kind of get a glimpse of what Ben Franklin does? Okay, so most people are looking for capital. I am going to spend most of the time talking about the capital process. I won't spend a lot of time about Ben Franklin, only because our marketing folks give us this huge slide deck, and I could spend a couple hours, and we're definitely not going to do that. So what I brought is, if you want to know more in general about Ben Franklin, I have these 2 brochures. They're really well done. We have a great photographer in-house, too. I mean, Jason does a fantastic job. All the photography is his. But there are 2 things that I brought, and I only brought a few copies because normally people are looking for capital. In some respects, they never care what Ben Franklin does. They just say, how do I get money from you guys? So this performance profile talks about all the companies in which we invested last year. So it's a really good glimpse of who we worked with and what kind of investments we did. And this is sort of an introduction to Ben Franklin. So you're free to take these. If you're looking just for an introduction about us, this is a really good way to do it. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about money. Okay. Do I have a clicker for the slides?
You don't, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So you get to call on it the whole time.
Let's roll. Can you, for the people over here, you can't see this, can you?
Yeah.
Can you over there? Okay.
I can close the shade too if that's helpful.
And with the thing that we're handing out, hopefully all the slides are going to be there. If everybody did their job yesterday, it should be an exact replicate of what I'm going to talk about, so you can just follow along.
Otherwise, you'll be missing like 4 slides. So it won't be too much.
Okay, so here's the general outline. I am going to talk a little bit for those that are here, just to understand what Ben Franklin is, what we do, kind of our history. But I'm going to spend the most part about capital, which means how we invest, what the kind of companies we're looking for, how does our process work, and then why you should think potentially Ben Franklin could be right for you. So my job today, frankly, is when you leave this room, for those of you looking for capital, you should understand after this presentation, is Ben Franklin right for me? Do I know how to come to you guys for money and what the process is going to be like? If I'm not clear in getting that message across, then I screwed up. And I need to stay here, and I'll stay here with every one of you until you feel comfortable, you know whether this is right for you. So that's my objective today. So on the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what is Ben Franklin. Next slide. Okay, we are a new tagline. We're partners with a purpose. What does that really mean? What it means is that we have been around for about 30 years. We were created in 1982 during the Thornburg administration, when I think legislators and policymakers said, of the industries that powered Pennsylvania for the first couple hundred years of its existence, going to continue to power Pennsylvania. And the thought was, no, we got to continue to attract new kinds of companies, new kinds of businesses. And so there was a real thrust at that time around sort of innovative, technology-based businesses. And the Ben Franklins were created to help stimulate the growth of those kind of businesses within the state of Pennsylvania. So first question we sometimes get, or there's an assumption, you know, you guys a government entity? The answer is no, we are not. However, we do get funding from the taxpayer, from you folks, to invest in companies to hopefully help them grow. So although we are not a government entity, I think of the state of Pennsylvania almost like a limited investment partner. So I'll get back to this when we talk about our structure and our process. But whenever you have a limited partner, for those of you that are seeking money, if you ever get money from someone, the people that give you money usually have rules and regulations by which you need to follow in order to use their money. So we do the same thing, getting that money from the state of Pennsylvania. And I'll talk about those nuances as we talk about our deal structure. So partners with a purpose, what does that really mean? We're really not the right people to come to if you're looking to come to us for a check and throw it over the wall and say good luck to you. I mean, sort of like a marriage, we're in there to be with you, to help you, to work with you, to connect you. We're going to do everything we can to try to make your business successful, which means it's more than just a check and see you later. It's a relationship we develop. I think we've had a lot of expertise working with younger companies and even more mature companies. So we're there to hopefully provide you more than just $1 and the use of that. That's why we say we're a partner for the company. So on the next slide, talk a little bit about, which is actually pretty amazing to me. We're a prolific investor. If you look, and this is an eye chart. It might still be an eye chart on your handout. But if you look nationally at the most prolific investors at early stage companies in the United States, there's names that you're probably aware of, and they're on this list. There's the Draper Fishers. There is the first round capital, Josh Koppelman. There are folks across the country that are doing huge numbers of deals that are well known in this space. And what's amazing is the Ben Franklin here in Southeast Pennsylvania, and I have some cards. You can see my card says SEP. It stands for Southeast Pennsylvania. Our Ben Franklin is just the purview of our territories, just the 5 counties around Philadelphia. If you look, we're in the top 10 nationally in the number of deals we do. We have about 140 companies in our portfolio. I was just amazed when I started working for Ben Franklin how many entrepreneurs. You look around, and I came from a large company background. You look around, neighbors, friends, whatever, just in the undercurrent of the Philadelphia area, how many really cool young companies and entrepreneurs are just sort of in your midst every day. And we're there to help them. We'll do about 30, 35, 40 deals a year. We're not doing the same amount of money as the Draper Fishers, for example, as the big VCs, but numbers of deals, we're very, very, very prolific. 2 things that happen with that. Number one is that when you see a lot of companies, you invest in a lot of companies, I always say I'm not like really super smart, but when you see a lot of companies, you can start recognizing patterns of what's working with certain companies and what's not. So when we see we have, again, 140 companies in our portfolio. When you start seeing what was clicking with some companies and not clicking with the other, we have a lot of good basis to say, hey, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should try that. Have you thought about doing this? Because we've seen the patterns of what works and what doesn't work. So I think when we come to you as an entrepreneur and say, have you thought about doing this, or can you think about doing that, there's some real basis for knowledge there, and I think that knowledge is what we try to pass on to all of our young companies. The second thing it does, I think it allows us to have a very broad reach in terms of the kinds of companies and technologies we see. So we have companies ranging from pure IT companies, drug therapeutics, medical devices, consumer products, materials, sensors, electronics. I mean, we see everything. So probably there's nothing here today that would be off base from what we've seen in the past. So that, I think, is one of the great things about being a very, very large investor. By the way, let me talk a little about Ben Franklin. Has anybody have friends across the state that have worked with Ben Franklins besides the Ben Franklin here in southeastern Pennsylvania? Anybody? Okay, no. There's a Ben Franklin that covers every single quadrant, if you will, of Pennsylvania. So no matter where you are as an entrepreneur in Pennsylvania, there is a Ben Franklin. There are 4 of them that canvass the whole state. As I said, ours is southeast Pennsylvania. We only do, the region right around Philadelphia. So I do have some people that say, well, I've worked with the Ben Franklin up in Lehigh Valley. I kind of know what you guys do. Thank you very much. I don't really need to hear what you're saying. What I tell them is, like, the Ben Franklins, each of the 4 gets to make systems and processes and investment structures that are right for those companies in their geographic terrain. So what happens in the Ben Franklin, what they do in Lehigh, is not mimicked by what we do here. So everything I tell you is germane to what this Ben Franklin is doing. And if you have friends or colleagues or yourself that has any familiarity with other Ben, just be careful about translating what you think you know from those other areas to our Ben Franklin here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's a Ben Franklin company like? There's really only 2 constraints. And because how many would consider themselves a fairly young or seed stage company here? Most people, right, would consider yourself really early stage. And I think most early stage companies, they find us, I don't know if they find us by design or by default. Have people here have you started looking for money? That fun, have you started raising money? Having fun? I've never done it, and I give credit to all the people that actually have to raise money. Raising the earliest stage of capital that you're going to raise is probably the hardest thing you're ever going to do. In fact, probably raising the first couple $100,000 is going to be far more difficult than raising the next few million, because if you can actually get your business going and start hitting some milestones, raising that second or third round can be far, far easier than that first bit. So that first bit is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. I've never heard anybody tell me it's fun. I haven't done it personally, but I can tell you that it's just a real difficult time. So as you're looking, although you're a seed stage company, before I started working with Ben Franklin, I always thought, well, if you want early stage capital, go to a VC, right? That's what I say on TV. You go to a VC. Well, what I've learned is venture capital folks typically are actually not so early stage. They want to see a company that has a lot of traction, maybe a certain amount of revenue, $3, $4, $5 million in revenue, maybe a certain amount of profitability. So what happens if you start knocking on the VC doors and say, can I talk to you about money? They'll typically say, listen, interesting, I love what you're doing, but potentially why don't you come back when? So the come back when is when you have these milestones. So the typical answer is, why don't you go talk to those wacky folks at Ben Franklin? They like Mikey, they do everything, right? Our mission is to help the companies even at the most precarious stage, at the earliest stage. That's what we do, that's our mission. But although young companies find us, we're not restricted to young companies. We can work with companies that have been in business for 20 years, for 2 years, or 2 days. The only constraints that we have around a Ben Franklin company are 2 things. You have to do something that kind of pushes the rock ahead in science, engineering, or technology. So normally we couldn't help a restaurateur. We couldn't help a consultant, because a consultant doesn't really have maybe their own intellectual property or patents. We probably can't help a distributor, because again, they're taking innovative products and maybe reselling them. So those are the kind of companies that we can't help, and that's by the designs of our lead investor, which is the state. They want us to work with companies that themselves have some innovative technology, science, or engineering. The second thing is that every company that has to use our money needs to use it for, I'll call it commercialization or top-line growth. So, and that's actually not a very big constraint. But our money is not supposed to be spent for buying a building, for buying land, buying equipment, or basic R&D, but I don't think anybody comes to us for basic R&D. But it's basically, if you're using your money to power top-line growth, which means the bulk of your budget is used for top-line growth, hiring people, making marketing collateral, going to trade shows, buying materials to build your product, almost everything you're doing is trying to stimulate that top-line growth. So if you're doing top-line growth plus moving the rock ahead in science, technology, engineering, you are a Ben Franklin eligible company. which means you don't have to be just 2 days old. You don't have to be a single employee. You could be a family-owned business that just needs a boost of capital. So the reason I wanted to mention that is because I think some people feel like, well, I don't know if I'm quite in the demographic range that you're looking for, my kind of company. Well, we're pretty inclusive, and the message is that we are inclusive. We look for a lot of companies, and we don't have tight constraints as long as you meet these. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we work, okay, and what we really do. So remember I told you it's not just capital, but it's the connections and it's that sort of advice or counsel. If you come to Ben Franklin, that's what we want to provide. The key takeaways from this slide here is, although we're not as big as a Kleiner Perkins or Draper Fisher in terms of dollars that we put on the street, we do a lot of deals. But remember, we're not big. So the maximum we can do is up to $1 million. Even that's a stretch for us. Last year, I think we put about $7 million on the street, maybe 30 companies. So if you do the math, you're kind of thinking, okay, well, they're kind of $200,000, $250,000 kind of investor. That's our sweet spot. So although we may do a couple deals that are up to $1 million, you kind of see that, if you're in that 250, 200 range, maybe if you're an IT-related company, you could have certainly far less capital constraints. $100,000 might be able to go quite a long way for you as an IT company. So just keep in mind, this is sort of the range we're looking at. We'll do our best to connect you with resources, with other investors, potential board members. I mean, our job is to make sure that you have the best of our knowledge to take your company forward. On the next slide. Oh boy, this is not the slide to show. And I don't even know if it's in your slide deck. This is really meant to show you that we don't do it alone. And part of the message you'll see on some of these slides is the way Ben Franklin works is we connect with a lot of other resources. And this is some of the investors that with whom we will co-invest in companies. So if you look at this, I mean, we've done deals with all the capital players in the Philadelphia region and beyond. So we'll do our best to connect you to sources of money. We'll try to do our best to connect you with sources of help and advice. And this is definitely an eye chart, but what's really meant here is to show you that we're not alone. I mean, part of our value add is being connected and partnering with so many other organizations to try to help you drive your business. The next slide. Okay, why come to Ben Franklin? My view is a couple things. Number one, if you are really an early stage company, you've started knocking on doors, those usually aren't easy conversations to have, and they'll say, come back when. So one of the great things about Ben Franklin is we actually take the chance, and we do the kind of deals that other people just don't do. We're like Mikey. We'll try anything, right? So that's really important because there's going to be a lot of companies that without the Ben Franklin kickstart, they never were able to really get going. It's interesting that and I'll talk about the process. I think we try to spend enough time doing due diligence on a company, and I'll go through how we vet a company. But as we do the due diligence, there's a lot of investors in the region that kind of say, we love how Ben Franklin kind of screens their companies. So if you come to Ben Franklin and you get approval for a deal, that sort of stamp of approval kind of carries a long way to other investors. It's not a role we seek, for example. We're not saying we're the smartest in the room. But other people have looked at us and said, geez, if you get through the process, I'll give you maybe a longer conversation. I'll look again at your business, or I'll work with you differently. So that, I think, is very helpful to young companies. We're patient capital. What does that really mean? It means, we sort of have a double or triple bottom line. Because the state is one of our lead investors, right? In some respects, their stakeholders don't really care whether we make a lot of money from our investments. And in fact, we don't make a lot of money. We're not in the game to have the same kind of returns as a venture group, for example. Our double and triple bottom line address stakeholders who say, if you're going to use our money to invest, we want the companies that you invest in to start creating jobs. So if you're a legislator, you could care less whether Ben Franklin gets an X% return on its investment. What you care about is the jobs created in my district, and I want Ben Franklin to find companies and help them create jobs there. The second thing that they say is, if those companies start growing and they start bringing in money, wouldn't it be great if they start bringing in venture dollars from other parts of the country? So that leverage, meaning extra dollars coming into your company, dollars coming into the region, those are metrics that our stakeholders really watch. So because of that, we're not like a venture fund that has a certain time that they need to liquidate their investments. So what I mean by patient capital is we'll go in there and we're not forcing you to sell your business or liquidate. We're there to really back the founder. As far as the founder wants to take that business, we're there to support it. We don't have to take money out to meet certain financial milestones that a venture group might have to do. We'll do everything we can to help your business. I can tell you that if you actually started talking to venture people right now, the cost of capital for venture capital, Joe, is it cheap? No. You come from a financial background. I mean, venture capital money is very, very expensive. Our money is not super cheap, but compared to venture money, it is much better, much better value and a lower cost of capital. So those are the things why I think we've been around for 30 years. We have 140 companies in our portfolio and many hundred that have graduated from the portfolio. If we didn't have that kind of value proposition, I don't think we'd be around. So I think the market sort of says there's a need for you guys, and it's validated by just the number of companies we work with. On the next slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how we invest. So if you skip on. Okay, again, kind of an eye chart. Hopefully on your slide deck, it's a little easier to see. For starting in the new millennium, we have now over 300 companies in which we've invested. It's a huge number. I mean, it's actually pretty staggering when you think of the number of companies that we touch. Almost $75 million invested. We have almost $40 million right now on the street working with companies that we have. I think if you look at the pie charts, those pie charts really sort of show that both the number of companies and the concentration in investment area. We segment our portfolio sort of broadly in three buckets. We sort of say there's an IT bucket, a life sciences bucket, and then mine is the other bucket. Now, they don't let me put other on the business card, so they call it physical sciences, but my portfolio is the most eclectic, and it has, again, consumer products, sensors, electronics, new materials. It's really kind of an interesting mixture. But as we segment our portfolio, you look here, you see, well, it's roughly about a third, a third, a third. What I can tell you is that's not by design, but by default. In other words, if every company coming in this funding round, if all the best companies are IT companies, we'll just do all IT deals. So we're not trying to necessarily have equal numbers here. The only reason that I'm bringing that up is not every company cleanly fits into a bucket, right? So some of you might be saying, well, geez, I'm doing healthcare IT. Is healthcare IT, is it really IT or is it really health? And so they try to outthink Ben Franklin and say, geez, if I come in as health, maybe that gives me a better chance of getting money instead of coming as IT or vice versa. And all I say is, what I say is, you can't game the system. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about slotting yourself into a particular area. Just worry about your business plan and what you're going to do. And we'll invest in the best companies that we see. So whether it's, again, IT company or health company, you don't have to obsess about how can I best navigate the Ben Franklin waters. It's not something that you can do. So you can see that we have fair representation of all across these portfolios. The next slide. This one is really kind of interesting, and I'd like to focus on it just for a second here. And I don't remember the numbers, so that's why I'm kind of getting closer to the screen here. So again, about $7.5 million invested last year. So we do invest money in follow-on. So a lot of people think, well, you come to Ben Franklin, get some money, and thank you very much, and that's the end of the relationship. But we do have the ability to do follow-on investments with companies. So if you look at the statistics last year, although about 2/3 of the companies were new investments, we did put more money into some existing investments. Either two reasons. One, they may have been sort of hitting it out of the ballpark, and other people are coming in with more dollars, and we wanted to ride the success. The other reason is that the companies are struggling, and they're saying, oh, my God, I need more money. Can you guys help me out, get through this rough patch? So follow-ons could be either really good things or not so good things. But it just says that if you're with the Ben Franklin, there is a potential of getting more money. So a lot of entrepreneurs ask me, say, listen, I really need $500,000. And we might say, listen, why don't you come to us for $200,000, and if things work well, let's talk about the follow-on investment. So you don't necessarily have to have a business plan that anticipates the big kahuna. You need to have a business plan that anticipates hitting certain milestones, and we're able to come in with that follow-on kind of dollars. So that's good. It's less pressure on the entrepreneurs to know that you can have a couple bites of the apple. If you look at where people are co-investing, and this is an important concept, and I'll talk about it in the process slide. One of the requirements that is imposed on us by our state of Pennsylvania stakeholder investors is that Ben Franklin cannot be we can't take the lead, if you will, as an investor. I always say we can't win best supporting actor. The best we can do is we can't win best actor. We can only win best supporting actor. What I mean by that is if someone asks Ben Franklin for money, they need to recognize, and you all need to recognize, a key thing, and circle it and put a star on your notes, is that you need to find matching dollars. We can't do all the heavy lifting. So if you have a budget of spending $500,000 next year in capital, think of it this way. The most you can come to Ben Franklin for is $250 out of that $500. You need to find that other $250 somewhere else. Really important concept. So if you say, listen, I need $100,000, can Ben do all this? No. Those are the rules in which we live by and that are imposed on us by our lead investor. So if you're getting matching funds, we call them matching funds, where are these matching funds coming from? There's actually some VCs early, so we have some VC money for some follow-on investments. So there are some VCs in the deals with us. Most of the co-investors are angels. So is everybody familiar with the concept of angels? I mean, high net worth individuals that make investments. So a lot of the co-investment with Ben Franklin are angel investors. There are angels in the region who are organized. You know Robin Hood Ventures. Does anybody know Robin Hood Ventures? Okay. So there's groups of high net worth individuals that organize, that say we're investors and you can approach them. There are high net worth individuals that don't like to promote the fact that they're investors, but they also invest in companies. And so those are largely co-investors with Ben Franklin. But actually, this other category is important, and that's where most of you might start off with. And that's the hardest things, tapping your credit cards, tapping your savings, friends and families, right? So that's usually where the youngest companies start out, is hitting up friends and family for capital. And that's the place where a lot of you will start. It's just natural. It's probably the easiest source of capital you can get. And these tend to be some of the co-investors with Ben Franklin at the early stage. This is, again, I apologize, this is kind of an eye chart, but this one is also important. People say, well, do you invest in companies that are pre-revenue? And if you look at the distribution here, the answer is yes. We do invest in pre-revenue companies. This is about 1/3 of our investments. But keep in mind that we also look for companies that have some traction. If you are an IT company, Alan, who leads that portfolio, he's been really rigorous about saying, do you have pilot stage customers? He's looking to say, has the company shown it has a value proposition that the market will accept? So although we will invest in pre-revenue companies, we do look for companies that have some kind of traction. Especially, Alan's looking more and more about validating your concept in the marketplace. This is, I think, in fact, about 25% of our companies have over $1 million in revenue. So you kind of say, is that early stage, is it seed stage, whatever. But I would keep in mind that one of the things that we've done in the past, and it's not a good investment thesis, is businesses coming to us and say, I have a great concept, okay? Look at Mark, see this? This is the time machine equation, okay? I have all the equations. I'm going to build a time machine. I haven't built it yet, but give me $500,000, I'm going to build that time machine, and I'll revolutionize the world. We've done those investments. And the reality is very few of the things on paper ever really translate into the product that they desire. So we have a very poor track record of just investing in paper ideas. That's why if you come to us, you have far more traction and far more credibility if you say, I've somehow reduced to practice my idea. It's not a paper concept. It's a real thing. I've made this product. I've validated my IT business with customers. So that's something I want to get across is very, very important. We will do pre-revenue, but it's hard to do paper concepts. Okay, next slide. This is, again, it's a difficult eye chart. What I try to get across here is when we have hundreds of companies in our portfolio, my message on this slide is, number one, not to necessarily impress you with examples of companies we've invested in, because we've invested in companies like Centercore that have become very large companies. We were there at some of the early stages. But what I tell every group of entrepreneurs, they kind of say, how big do I have to be? What kind of market size do I have to be a Ben Franklin company? And what I tell them is the Philadelphia region, I think we're blessed because we have a fairly diverse economy. And if you don't have the legs or you don't have the DNA to be a billion-dollar company, so what? This region is made up of companies that are good large companies, good medium-sized companies, and good small companies. So you don't have to be apologetic if your market size is this big. You don't have to have a market size this big because all those kinds of companies are very, very valuable to make this mosaic that we call the Philadelphia economy. So again, you don't have to say, geez, I can't come to Ben Franklin because I don't, my market's relatively, it's a niche market. Don't worry about that. There's big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies that are all great in this region. They create jobs, they do good things, they're innovative, and we want to help as many as we can. Next slide. Okay, what are we looking for? Let's start talking about the process. How do we evaluate companies? None of this should be a surprise. I mean, what we look for is the same thing you would probably look for if you were in my shoes or a venture firm would look for. You know, do you have experience launching a business? Not everybody does, that's fine. If you don't have experience launching a business, if you're not a serial entrepreneur, if you don't have business experience, this one maybe I put that bold and in red check mark, especially Alan and Jen are really concerned about who are you getting to help you navigate your business. If you're not the expert, who are you bringing in as your advisors? Do you have a board of directors? Alan is very, very wedded to the concept of having a board of directors early on. I'm maybe less formulaic about that, but certainly I always tell people, you know, in my life, I've met a lot of, I think, really good, smart people. I've met very, very few amazing, outstanding people. Because those amazing few, that's why they're amazing, because there's very, very few of them, right? When I was in graduate school, I did my PhD under a Nobel laureate. Maybe he was one of the ones in that elite class. But I always tell entrepreneurs, I mean, do you have the chops to understand finance, sales, supply chain, regulatory issues? Do you know it all in your business? Do you know all those dimensions about running the business? If you don't, and most entrepreneurs don't, I mean, you have to be amazing to know all those things. Start thinking about who do I start bringing in to help me navigate this business? Who's going to be my advisor? Maybe do I have a board of directors? So this is, as you start thinking about what we're looking for, one of the easiest ways to kind of evaluate a company is kind of like who their friends are, who they associate with. We see a lot of times businesses that are run or started by engineers or science people, technology people, because remember, we help those kinds of businesses. So a lot of times, the businesses come to us, someone has a better idea, a better widget, a better program, a better app, a better device. So most of the ideas are started with someone who has some sort of engineering chops to them, right? So the first thing I ask them is, how are you going to sell your product? And I have to say, there are some engineers and scientists, they turn out to be good salespeople, but a lot of them are they're just not natural-born salespeople. So I always say, well, tell me who's going to sell the product? Well, I'm going to sell it. What's your experience in sales? Well, I don't have any, but I'll learn, okay? So I say, okay, the first sales job you have is go recruit some advisors. Go to people who you would like to have help your company and convince them and sell them on the fact that they should give up some of their time and energy to sit on your advisory board and help you. That's your first sales job. If you can't get those people on, maybe you should think about how you're going to sell your product as well. So keep in mind, a lot of skills necessary to run a business. If you can't do it all, start thinking about that help. Think who's going to backfill those gaps in your knowledge base. Obviously, we're funding companies that have some element of innovation. So what kind of barrier to entry do you have? Do you have patents? Do you have trade secret knowledge? We really look at the elements, the underlying underpinnings of the business and what you have to prevent someone else from basically stealing what you do. Do you have a good business plan? This one, again, is really important. We can have that match money. Leverage source of capitals, match. Where are you going to get the match? You know, if you come to Ben Franklin, again, I don't care how much you want from us. We're mandated that you need to bring in that other piece. Sometimes we'll mandate you need 2 times the pieces that we provide. So if the company's really $200,000, but you need to spend $1 million in your business plan, there's a lot of things you need to do. If we put in 2, you got to get 8 from somewhere else. Show me where you get that 8. That's actually a 4-to-1 match, right? For 800,000, we'll put in our 200. So keep in mind, if you haven't started going for those other sources of money, you have to start thinking about doing that in parallel. Now, there's a question that always comes up. I might as well address it now and try to head it off to the past. People say, can I come to Ben Franklin, apply for money, and if I get that approval, that stamp of approval, can I and start raising money from other sources? And the answer is yes, you can do that. And some people have done that to their benefit. The challenge we have, though, is if we make a commitment to invest in your company, we can only hold open that commitment for so long, right? So if you come through our process and we say we'll invest $200,000, $250,000 in your company, and you need to raise another $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and you're just starting at that point, what's going to happen is we have funding cycles every quarter. So the next time we go on the calendar and start a new funding cycle, what's going to happen is when our board of directors ask us, well, what happened last cycle? You funded, what's the name of your company?
Airline Hydraulics.
Okay, Airline Hydraulics. Have you funded, all right, we made a commitment to Airline Hydraulics. Has that deal closed yet? No, we haven't closed. Why not? Well, they haven't got their match money yet. Okay, Mark, if they haven't got their match money, how long can you hang in there? Because other entrepreneurs are knocking on the door. So tell the company they need to close so that we can close. Otherwise, have them come back in and reapply at another time. So keep in mind, if you wait too long to get that match money, you might be butting up against some calendar issues. That's why I always say work these things in parallel. Finally, I think one of the things you need to basically convince any investor, you need to convince them that basically if you get this money, it's somehow going to change the nature of your business. If you spend that money, somehow your business is kind of here, and then when you use that money, your business is kind of here, and that here and here is different for every company. But you need to make a case that somehow you will transform the company and its value and its position and its place in the market with the use of the money. And that is the case you really need to make to Ben Franklin when you come in and pitch for dollars. Next slide. Okay, what are the requirements? Again, match, match, match. Don't forget about that. Because we're located in the 5-county area, every business has to also be located in the 5-county area. So if you are a Jersey-based company, and I've invested in companies who started off in Jersey and moved into the 5-county area, that's fine. But we can't invest in a Delaware company that stays a Delaware company. We can't invest in a Jersey company. We can't invest in a Lehigh Valley company because there's another Ben Franklin there. So you have to be in the 5-county region of Philadelphia. That's just the rules. Do you have to have all your operations here? No. Do you have to have your headquarters here? No. But the people who lend us money from the state, they define it as the company needs to have a significant operating presence in this region. They haven't defined significant operating presence, but we define that more than just, let's say, a mailbox. You go in and get some mail. You have to have feet on the ground, boots on the ground, people here. If you do that, it doesn't have to be the whole company, but you need to be in this region. This one is maybe less important. We'd like to see the money recycled in the region. All we tell people is if you're going to get marketing collateral, do you have to go to a marketing firm located in Austin, Texas? Aren't there good marketing firms here? If you use a patent attorney, does your patent attorney have to be from DC, or can you use a Philadelphia regional patent attorney? So we'd like to see as much of the money kind of in a virtuous cycle stay in this region. It's not critical. I always tell a company, if you have to get especially protein from a lab in Switzerland for your testing, well, so be it. That's where you got to get it. But as much as possible, if there are services that you can get in this region, we like to see that money spent here. Obviously, we want sustainable businesses. So if you have a business that you really want to, I don't have a good example. I always used to say I'm trying to look around. Yeah, there's some folks probably with gray hair. There's a lot of young folks here, but. Pet Rocks. I don't know if you remember Pet Rocks. We couldn't do that business. That was a business you go in, make a splash, and a year later, there's no business anymore. So our businesses can't be of that ilk. They have to be something that hopefully be sustainable. And again, we want to talk about the budget milestone. What are you going to accomplish for the money you put in? Next slide. Okay, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of the process. Next slide. I'm going to spend a lot of time on here. In the back of your slide deck, we've broken down some of these steps into more granularity, but I'm going to sort of spend some time on this slide rather than going from slide to slide, if possible. And I hope I'm right, because we modified the slide deck yesterday, so I'm hoping that it's actually going to come out as I hope it does. So the first step, you've taken the first step. You've come to learn about us, our process, whatever. Most people in their first step will send us an executive summary. If you haven't written an executive summary, but has anybody not written an executive summary? Good. For those that want a good guideline to do an executive summary, I think there's a website called gust.com, and it's a venture website. Go on gust.com. They have a great template for doing an executive summary if you've never done one. The executive summary just sort of says, hey, I'm going to test the waters. Let me send an executive summary to Mark, and I'll get some feedback from him as to what he thinks this business is. I'm not a handicapper, so a lot of people say, what's my chance of getting Ben Franklin money? I say, I have no idea, because you're going to run through this process. So I'm not going to handicap you, but what I can tell you is I see certain things that are strengths, and I see certain things that are gaps. This is what you got to remember if you want to come into the process. Put it this, by the way, anybody that wants to come into the process, because we utilize, in part, taxpayers' money, our process, I can tell you, is scrupulously transparent. It is scrupulously fair and equitable, meaning I don't care if you're a company of 20 or 2, you walk the same path. We don't do insider deals. There's no favorites. Everybody walks the same path. I can tell you that is unequivocally true. So if you told me, listen, I need money tomorrow, hey, we can't help you. You've got to walk this path just like everybody else. So there's no way you can sort of jury-rig the system to kind of do shortcuts, all right? So as I start looking at this executive summary, I'll kind of give you the pros and cons. However, I could say, listen, there's some challenges here, but you are free to apply. We will not turn down anybody for doing a proposal and doing an application. So everybody is free to come through the transom and start getting evaluated for their proposal. Where the rubber meets the road, though, is not the executive summary. It's what's coming up pretty shortly, which is the submission of the proposal or application, whatever. That's your business plan. That's your proposal for money. There's a barrier there that you got to think about. The barrier is a $500 initiation fee to get into that process. It helps partially defray the cost, and I'll talk about our due diligence. There's no cost for the executive summary. You can get free feedback, but if you're in our process, you got to write a check. So that hopefully will discourage people who are kind of on the bubble about, do I really want to do this? The application process, we have a template on our web. We're working on an online submission process as well, but I wouldn't obsess about this. We're basically looking for a business plan, how much money you need, what's your management team like, who are your co-investors, what do you hope to accomplish, what are you going to spend the money on? I mean, it's all straightforward blocking and tackling. We then have two, I haven't watched the full show. My kid likes it. But we have two sort of Shark Tank episodes. The first one is after we get your proposal, about a couple weeks later, you will meet in front of a group of people who are all volunteers. Every one of those folks has signed an NDA. Whatever you submit to us doesn't leave the Ben Franklin premises. It's all confidential. You will stand there and you will talk about, in the first step, your technology. You'll present your case, and it'll be maybe 10 minutes of presentation time, maybe about 40 minutes of Q&A. So that's your Shark Tank moment. Well, the people around the table at that point could be patent attorneys, they could be university professors, could be business owners. They're there to basically help vet the technology concept that's underpinning your business. What happens if you've already proven the technology and really what you have to do is then just execute your business plan? Well, this first gate should be actually pretty easy because you've already validated everything. But not every company has the technology ready to go. There's still some things they need to spend money on to launch their product. So that checkpoint is to vet the technology. This is a pass-fail. So everybody around the table, we come to a consensus decision. Does this company merit going forward into the next stage of the process? If the answer is yes, and hopefully everybody here, the answer is yes, we will then embark on what we call the due diligence review process. We hire people, not Ben Franklin employees, but consultants, to meet with you, to meet with your suppliers, to meet with your lawyers, to meet with your accountants, to meet with your customers, and we'll draft about a 20-page due diligence report, and that kind of is, it's kind of like if you were looking in the mirror trying to see what the pros and cons of your business is. And that due diligence report, a lot of people say, and I don't know, I mean, you went through it, right, Joe? Was it valuable? I mean, it's, you know, I think everybody would say that they've learned something by having someone outside of their sphere look at the business independently and make some comments. The due diligence report, as well as your proposal, will then inform the next Shark Tank moment. And I think this one is probably the more challenging of the two. And Joe, you could comment. I mean, if I'm saying anything that, you know, you've been through it. I think that this one is the more challenging of the two because, frankly, the people around the room here are sort of, they're also people that love technology. So usually, people like technology, rather than, it's not like a Shark Tank day. They usually are giving you suggestions rather than trying to deflate your ideas, right? They say, have you tried this, or have you thought of this? This one is the Shark Tank moment where the people around the table are much more money people. They could be angel investors, they could be private equity folks, they could be business owners, they could be business attorneys. So they see themselves as one of the real key stakeholders for Ben Franklin making an investment. So they tend to be, I think the questions tend to be a little more pointed, a little bit more about the financial part of your business plan. I mean, would you agree? I mean, it's more challenging at this gate. If you go through this gate, then you're done with the process. And what I do is then I go internally to my board of directors and my investment committee, and I become you. I become your advocate. So I go in front of my own Shark Tank, and I say, and it was advanced, airline hydraulics. I'll go and say, listen, I want to do a $300,000 investment in airline hydraulics. These are the reasons why. And so I'm in front of my own sharks, and they're going to pepper me with the same kind of questions that you were peppered with, and it's in front of my own investment committee to allow the investment to go through. So that's our process. Right now, the process is about a 12-week process. That's why we do 4 cycles per year. Typically, once we get proposals, about 2 weeks later, we'll schedule this. It takes about 7 weeks, 6 weeks to commission the due diligence, prepare for this meeting, and then my internal Shark Tank meetings, when you add all that up, comes to about 12 weeks. What we're experimenting with, though, especially for IT companies, is Alan is actually trying to see if he can combine these two into one meeting day. So just one Shark Tank meeting. So Alan's trying to see if he can do this whole process in a compressed time frame, maybe like 7 or 8 weeks total. So he's working on that. It's much more challenging to do the due diligence and the question and answer sessions. However, I mean, if you're an IT company and you have some, especially if you've raised money or you're raising money with other parties and you're kind of waiting for Ben Franklin, we don't want to be the last to the party. We spend a lot of time and effort trying to see if we can accelerate that part of the process. Talk to Alan about his timing and how he can maybe accommodate you. What I've been doing for the most part is sticking with the vanilla about 12 weeks time frame. This is, compressing the due diligence is really hard as we get to know the company and strengths and weaknesses. So that's our process. That's really what you should be looking at. And even if you go through Alan's more compressed process, just think of it, optional executive summary. Submit your proposal, Shark Tank Day, due diligence, and then we sell it internally. So whether that's 12 weeks or 8 weeks or 7 weeks on a compressed process, that is what we do for every company. Next slide. Okay, and this is I think the last part that I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure of the deal. And if we go on the next slide, this is I think it's maybe going to be I don't know how deep I want to get into this, because our board of directors has given us the ability and the tools to tweak deal structures as appropriate to every company as needed. But I can't tell you every variation on the theme. What I can tell you is this is vanilla. I don't even know if it's French vanilla. It's just kind of plain old vanilla. But remember, there's all sorts of flavors of vanilla, and we have departures. And I'll try to tell you a little bit about those, but not go into detail. First thing is, if you come to Ben Franklin, for the most part, again, vanilla, we're a lender, okay? So although Alan is doing some equity deals from the get-go, which means we're investing as an equity owner instead of a lender, and my portfolio is largely I am a lender. And so you're going to take a loan out, and that loan can be a convertible note. What a convertible note means is there's going to be some times during the history of your company, as you go forward, I can actually take that loan and convert it into ownership at our discretion. But largely speaking, think of it as you're taking out a note. The note right now has a simple interest of 8%. What that means is it's not compounded. So if you get a $100,000 note from Ben Franklin, you pay $8,000 in interest every year, and then it's actually, and I think we talk about it here, it's a balloon structure. What's really cool about the note is that, again, we'll use the example of $100,000. If you take a $100,000 note from Ben Franklin, the only thing you pay us is the interest every year until at the end of the 5th year is when that $100,000 comes back. So from a cash flow perspective, it's really kind of neat in that you pay $8,000 the first, $8,000 the second, $8,000 the third, $8,000 the fourth, and $108,000 the fifth. So it's not like a car loan. It's not like a home mortgage where you're having amortized principal and interest. It's really getting the company to be able to use the money effectively from the get-go. And I think that's really, really a good feature. And in fact, to make it even better, the very first year that we provide you money, we call that the project period. That's when you're working on that part of the business plan that you submitted to us. Even though the interest is accruing, we don't even take money out of the company. We defer taking money out until the second year. So the very first year, you get the use of $100,000, nothing in terms of cash comes back to Ben Franklin. It is, I think, a really good source of capital. The second thing is, and probably, I don't know if it says it here, we're a non-recourse loan. Okay, what does that mean? It means, and this young lady, you are? No. Janelle, okay? Janelle Shorehouse. If the company fails, we don't take that. You get to keep the Shorehouse, okay? Joe, that plane in Philadelphia, that Learjet, that's still yours. And I always say we don't want your kids anyway as collateral, so you can keep your kids. So what's really kind of neat is the loan is only secured by business asset, not personal assets. Have any of you gone for an SBA loan? Have they asked you to pledge your house? You probably would give your kids up faster than the house, right? You're supposed to take the kids, I want my house. But what's really neat about the Ben Franklin money, it is non-recourse. There's no collateral other than business collateral. So if the business tanks, you keep your home, you keep everything, and that's, I think, really, really a good feature. Another feature, I think, that's really kind of good, especially if you're a young company with not a lot of revenue, when it's time to pay us the interest, if you don't have the money, you can choose to pay 3% of your revenue from the last quarter, whichever is the lower amount. So imagine if you're pre-revenue and you have no revenue, and if you have zero revenue, 3% of zero is zero. So you could literally go for a couple years, not pay us a nickel, and still be fully compliant with the loan. And that's, I think, it's actually pretty amazing. Now, we don't necessarily advocate you go for years and years without revenue. I'm not saying that's a good plan. I'm just saying that we don't want to take money out of the company. So if your interest payment is this much, but your business can't support that payment because it's really, really small, we're not going to force you to pay what really takes money out of the business. We want the money to work for you to grow the business. I think that's really good. And that's the 3% of revenue. You can prepay without penalty, so if you're knocking it out of the ballpark and say, I don't want this loan, I don't want Ben Franklin, Mark's a jerk, you're going to pay us off, and then we shake hands and go away. So that's a really good thing, no prepayment penalty. We've had some companies that they've only used the money for less than a year and paid us off, said thank you very much, we needed that money, it was great when we used it, but we now have enough liquidity that we can then take you out. Absolutely fine. Now, talk a little bit about convertible debt. Remember, I told you that we can convert to equity. What does that really mean, and how does this work? And the way it works is convertible debt is a great vehicle for me as an investor, right? Because unlike some of the other Ben Franklins, they do it a little differently than we do. Convertible debt means I don't have to have that conversation with you the entrepreneur about the value of your business. If we're going to invest as equity, we have to have that nasty conversation about what your business is worth. So your business is, okay. So I don't know whether you're early stage or you have some traction, but it's really hard for an early stage company that doesn't have a lot of revenues. And they say, Ben Franklin, can you put in $250,000 in equity or ownership in this business? And we could say, yeah, okay, but then how much is my $250,000 worth, right? That's the whole Shark Tank thing, right? They go in there and say, well, I'm going to, I'll give you 10% of my business for $100,000. What does that really mean? It means they're valuing their business at $1 million. If they're giving away 10% for 100, it means they believe the value of the business is $1 million. Well, entrepreneurs, I've never met a pessimistic entrepreneur. You are the most optimistic people in the whole world, because you can't be a pessimistic entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur is discussing and talking about what that valuation is, right? And you see it on Shark Tank, right? Well, I won't give away 10% of my business for $1 million, but I'll give 3% for $1 million or something like that. And so what convertible debt does, it negates that conversation. And what we wait for is we wait for that next round of capital to come in when you have that valuation discussion with other investors. And there is the market that validates it. It's hard to validate the early stage what your business is worth, but as you get more and more traction, and then you do have that Shark Tank discussion with other investors, we can come in and convert at that valuation that they set, that the market sets. So we're not going to set the value. We'll wait for other more experienced investors to come along and set the value. So that's the convertible note. That's vanilla, okay? How do we change from vanilla? We change from vanilla by doing a couple things. If you're an IT company and you're raising investor dollars from angel groups, and those angel groups are typically only investing as equity, right? They want to have that 10x return. If Alan likes your company, Alan might say, I got to play along with the other investors. The other investors don't want Ben Franklin to have a different deal than they have. So it's basically anybody that wants to be in this company, here's the deal. Either take it or leave it. So we have done equity deals where we come in from the get-go, not as a lender, but as equity. We've done other deals where we have amortized principal and interest payments, shorter maturity timelines. So we've sort of tweaked everything. Now, I don't know, is your business a family business?
No, well, we're actually employee-owned.
Okay, employee-owned. I mean, there's some challenges to employee-owned businesses about giving up equity. So we could work with your company differently than we work with that vanilla structure because of the way that certain companies, their history, the way they're capitalized, the way they're owned. So our board of directors says you don't have to force fit French vanilla on everybody. And that's why if you have a different capital need or a different structural need, we can work with you on that, and we'll find a way to do it. Okay, that's French vanilla. The only thing you should take away from this slide is, if this is not right for you, it's not the end of the discussion. Talk to us about how we can tweak this to make it right for you. And our board has given us the ability to tweak this. All right, next slide. Okay, I'm going to spend just a second on this. Again, I'm talking about French vanilla. And this is the most confusing slide, and I won't spend more than a minute on it. And this gentleman's name is? Zikrio? Okay, Zikrio, you didn't know it. He is fanatically wealthy, this guy. Okay, so I want to be his money manager. And I want to manage, I'm only going to manage $5 million of his assets. But my value proposition is, I'm going to manage your $5 million assets, and I'm going to invest it in the youngest, riskiest companies out there, and I'm going to get, at best, 8% return for your money. Good chance I'm not hired, right? So the same thing in terms of French vanilla. Remember I said we're a lender? Yes, we are a lender. But along with being a lender, we are going to ask for a little bit of equity. Now, in your case, maybe not, because we can tweak that. But for most French vanilla kind of deals, we're largely a lender, convertible debt, but we want to get a little bit of equity, and that's sort of our upside in case the company grows. The equity comes in the form of warrants, so you can kind of call these options. I won't go into the nuances of how they work, but all we're saying is that if you let's say, if you get a loan for $100,000 for Ben Franklin, somewhere between 25 and 50% of that loan value, meaning $25,000 to $50,000 of equity, will come along with that loan. And again, you're going to say, well, how much is $30,000 of equity in my company? And I'm going to say, we don't know until that next valuation event, until the marketplace comes in later on and values it. So again, if I'm your money manager at 8%, you're going to say there's no way. Same thing in our portfolio. If we just had no upside potential, it would be really, really a difficult value business model for us. So the loan plus a little bit of equity, that's what you should think of as French vanilla. For you guys, we would have to tweak something very, very different just because you're a more established company, and so we can do that. But for most people, they'd be looking at this kind of structure. Okay, next slide.
So if you're converting, that's on top of that?
Well, great question. If we're converting, see, that's where you're starting to talk about all these different nuances. A lot of times if we convert, what we would say is, that equity piece you gave us the warrant, we'll get rid of that if we can get a little bit of discount on the way we convert. So if the new money coming in is coming at this price per share, we might say get it at 80% of that value and we'll throw our warrants away. I mean, there's a lot of horse trading that goes on, and that's why I don't want to go into all those details, but it's a really good question. Okay, member security. No personal collateral. And honestly, I've had so many companies tell me that was so big for them. And I think it would be big for me too, because you get to a certain point in your life where, you don't want to necessarily risk everything to start a business, and this is a great way to get money where you're not pledging your whole life to the bank. Next slide. I'm not going to go through this because it is an eye chart, probably unreadable. But here's the secret. Here's the secret to this slide. What this is when you submit a proposal, you're going to submit a spending budget. And you're going to say, next year I need to spend $400,000 for my business. I know I can only come to Ben Franklin for $200, but I need to spend $400, so I got to get that $200 from other places. And that is sort of what's captured in the budget. And what we're going to look for is you start putting all your line items where you're going to spend money on. You're going to spend it on salaries, you're going to spend it on trade shows, you're going to spend it on buying raw material, on consultants. This is going to be in your budget. And the thing we look for is how much cash you're asking from Ben Franklin, is $200, but how much cash you're bringing in for other sources and where are those sources of cash. So if you come in with a budget that says, I'm looking for $200,000 from Ben Franklin, but I'm only getting $50,000 from other sources, we're going to say, okay, you don't meet that one-to-one criteria. That's a really tough position for us. If you want $200,000 from Ben Franklin and you have $500,000 from other sources, out of a $700,000 spending plan, a lot stronger case to make, right? So that's the secret of what we'll look for initially. I won't go through that in detail. Next slide. It's the same kind of slide, except here as you're talking about milestones, that's what you're going to accomplish. So it's different than what you're spending the budget line items for. It's just what I hope to get done. And that's what you codify that in the milestones. Next slide. Okay, we like boards. We will not take a voting board seat on your company. However, we do want to have an advisory or observation right if you have a board. Not every company has a board, but if you have a board of directors, I sit in a lot of board meetings. I don't vote, but I am there to basically watch, hopefully provide independent advice, independent feedback. And I think a lot of companies like having an independent person kind of looking in that's not a board member. But we will not ever take a voting place on your company's board of directors. Next slide. Okay, this is the last bit of it, the benefits of Ben Franklin. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I remember I talked about partnerships, right? And this is, I'm only going to spend literally about 5 minutes here. The rest is in your slide deck. There's another part of Ben Franklin. I am in what's called the investment group, and my job is so easy. I say I write checks to good companies. These guys are another facet of Ben Franklin that's far more difficult, I think, to describe. And they have the harder job. And the technology commercialization group is designed to kind of build those networks. So on the next slide, and we're going to crank through these very quickly, I'm going to show some examples of where we have partnered with universities, large companies, federal agencies. We have all these partnerships that are designed to help you and grow your company. So here's an example, I think, of a couple really cool ones. PA Life Science Connect. Maybe not germane for this room, I'm not sure. If you came from the pharma industry, the biotech industry in Philadelphia, which has had a lot of layoffs, you're a smart person. We don't want to lose you. We want to keep you in this region. we have a little bit of money to try to match you as an ex-employee of Big Pharma to maybe some emerging technologies, maybe coming out of universities. So we say to you, listen, if we can give you some money, take your smarts, here's some technology that's not being exploited, maybe you can start a business around that and create your own business. So we're doing everything we can to help displace workers from the pharma industry, be productive and stay in this region. Here's another thing that's really cool, and this one is just in the early stages, FabNet. My first job ever outside of a paper boy was as a caddy, okay? So I started playing golf really early on. I'm crappy at it, right? After all these years. It's really silly to do it. Okay, so I always had this idea of I have to have this training device that can magically make me into a better golfer. So I had this idea of somehow having this accelerometer that kind of tells where the hands are in my swing, and I can mimic that after really good players, and it'll be a teaching aid. Okay, so that's my vision, is like my wacky entrepreneur vision, what I'd like to do. How the heck would actually, I don't know enough about electronics. I have this vision, but I don't know how to build this. What FabNet does is we have some companies in this region where they have all the pieces. If you want to build something and test it out, you can actually get it done at these kinds of companies. So they have machining, they have ability to make electronic circuits, they have metal fabrication. So by using FabNet, I can actually reduce to practice that idea because they have other people who can say, I'll help you build the electronics to build your testing device. Or I'll do 3D printing and I'll make the plastic housing so you can actually put the electronics in the plastic housing. The FabNet, if you ever wanted to reduce an idea to practice, this is the only place that we have, I call it free money. We will provide up to $500,000 free money for you to build a prototype using the FabNet resources. It's the only grant money that we have. The only requirement is I think you have to match that $5,000. So if you wanted to build a prototype for $10,000, we would supplement half of that cost for free. It's really kind of cool. So you can look at the FabNet partners we have, and those are kind of two examples of partnerships. Next slide. This one I will spend a minute on. The investment group is designed to say, I write checks to good companies. But what happens if you're a company where you're still in that really, really early stage? You maybe haven't reduced to practice. Remember I said we want you to reduce that idea to practice? It can't just be an idea on paper. Like, I didn't fib, but in the back of our tool chest, we have $50,000 loans that are really trying to help you bring reduction to practice. Technology Acceleration Fund. So we take a few, I'll call them flyers. We'll do $50,000 loans where someone says, I have this idea. I want to see if I can reduce it to practice. We're not going to put in $300,000. We're not going to put in $250,000. But we will commit $50,000 for a few of these ideas to try to reduce them to practice. And it's really cool. We don't have a lot of these. We don't do a lot because they're very, very high risk. But the neat thing about this kind of project is that you don't even have to have a full one-to-one match. All you have to do is have half the match, half the cast match. So if you have a really neat idea and you don't know how to get going, you say $50,000 can make, I can actually prove that this thing can work, come to us for those TAF loans, and that's something we should really talk about if that's really something that's important to you. Next slide, and I think we're almost done here. I'm not going to talk, and here's the FabNet partners I did talk about. Many of you, do you know NextFab? Do you know the folks in NextFab? Okay, they're a partner here. We have EFE up in Horsham, does a lot of electronics manufacturing assembly. So some neat partners in FabNet. Next slide. We're working on some advanced manufacturing partnerships. I won't go through that, but if you're looking at advanced manufacturing concepts and practices, we're working on partnerships for that. And I think what we'll do is, I think we can, and again, I'm not going to dwell on all these. Next slide. This one's not germane here, but if you know companies outside the United States that might want to land, we'd love to land in Philadelphia, not in New York, not in Boston, not in Austin, not in San Jose. Navigator is a program designed to bring companies from outside the region and give them some support and services so they make Philadelphia home. Next slide. And these are some of the things that the Navigator does, maybe not germane here, so next slide. We have some, I mean, Andrew, you're working on energy efficiency stuff. You probably know about that Philadelphia won a huge award, a grant from the DOE to look at how do you make buildings like this, not new buildings, but how do you make buildings like this far more energy efficient? And there's this commercialization center for building energy efficiency located in the Navy Yard. So if you do have some technology related to energy efficiency, we can connect you up with some of the things going on in the Navy Yard. And I think that's really about it. Let's go through the last couple slides. This is a Life Science Connect I talked about. I won't talk about health IT. I'm going to leave that to Jen. If anybody's health IT, I'll connect you with Jen directly. These are partnerships around commercialization, around what's called translational research in pharma. Next slide. If you have any questions, not from the investment group, if you have questions about technology commercialization group, I'll connect you to some of these resources. Next slide. And I think that's it. So, apologize for being a little bit late, but here's what I tried to tell you about. A little bit about Ben Franklin. And again, if you want to know more, take our performance profile. Look at who we invested in last year. But if you come to us, I hope you understand the process, how to get through the process, the time it takes. I hope you understand a little bit about our deal terms, the loan, the equity, the security provisions. I hope you know something about the timing, is when you have to come in and how quickly that we can make a decision. And I hope to basically be able to talk to you individually or collectively about any questions you have about our process. It's a pleasure to be here. What's amazing, I don't know what's happening in Westchester. I haven't been here in a long time. There's like no parking spaces until you get to the roof of that building too. This is crazy. This is, there must be really great things happening here locally, because it was.
There's a lot of hyper-local builds to bring in more people, business professionals, and we're certainly doing a lot out of this hub. So hopefully you'll hear more about what's happening in Westchester.
I'd like to learn more about this as well. What's that? Is doing a good job as well.
Yeah,
No, it's really. This is. I sort of thought of Westchester kind of a sleepy, borough, but it's hopping. If you look at the number of cars in the park, it's pretty hopping in this area.
So we have a solid half an hour to open it up for questions for Mark, and then after that, Mark, you seem like you're pretty comfortable to stay
Sure.
one-on-ones.
Yeah, I don't want anybody. If you have questions, I don't want you to leave unless you have your questions answered. All right.
Can you maybe do a little more detail or round out for me? When is too late versus too early to reach you all? And I ask that because I have a friend who's running a company, and they were doing about 150K in revenue, and they thought, we might be too late. And they went to Ben Franklin, and they said, actually, you're kind of early.
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. It's really case by case. I'll go back to what I said in one slide. The only criteria are they doing something new in science, engineering, or technology? Would our money be used to help grow the top line? If those two things are yes, then it's almost independent of the revenue, right? If those are two things, then you're automatically a company that it could be right for us. Now, the specifics of $150,000, whether that's early or late, again, it's all case by case. If you've been in business 30 years and you're at 150,000 revenue, I might say, I'm not sure about this. But if you're out of the gate, 150,000 and you need some growth capital, we'd be intercepting you earlier. So it's all case by case. Without knowing the details, there's nothing that I would say that they would make them inappropriate for Ben Franklin. Clearly, they should talk to us.
Okay.
You talk a lot about partners and kind of creating those and fostering those. Do you help people find angel or venture capital when they need it?
Yeah,
Are you part of finding that 1-to-1 ratio or 1-to-2 ratio?
The answer is yes. We'll do our best to make connections. We can't close a deal for the company, right? So what we can do is make warm introductions to various angels or various venture groups, and we hope that our warm introductions, because we filter what we would tell them, would at least give those folks a leg up, maybe to someone coming out just off the street. So yes, we do that routinely and regularly. We have that list of, I don't know how many tens and tens and tens of other investors are in deals with us, but I always say, and again, I look at the demographics of the room, I say our Rolodex is deep, but there's some You know what a Rolodex is? You don't, do you? You don't, you made that up. Yeah, oh, very good. But we have a deep Rolodex, and we do, we'll make connect, well, we do that routinely,
For
absolutely.
certain, his children will have no idea what role.
Probably not,
It's
okay.
called LinkedIn.
Yes.
What's the most common mistake you see a company make as they're going through the process?
Wow, really good question.
Top two.
I see sometimes trying to game the system by, for example, having a budget mismatched with what they need. So here's the biggest mistake I say overall. You know, as a young company, you don't have a lot of assets. The biggest asset you have as an entrepreneur, okay, the absolute biggest asset is your credibility. So if you do anything to compromise your credibility to investors, you've lost the most important asset you have. So as you pitch, what you pledge to do, you plan, all that is your credibility on the line. So for a specific example, if you say, you know, the worst thing you do is say, I need to spend $500,000, when really, for what you want to do, you need $2 million. So why would you go in and pitch for, and the reason you're pitching $500,000 is you figure you'll never get 2, so I might as well start off by pitching a half, right? So, you know, it's less daunting. But the problem is people are going to look at it and say, there's no way they can do what they want to do in a half, they should be asking for 2. That doesn't mean they'll get 2, but at least you haven't given up your credibility in what you do. The opposite could be true as well, which is a lot of entrepreneurs do it. They ask for this much money, knowing that they really only need to spend this much, but they ask for this much, hoping to get a buffer, and so they sort of pad the numbers, thinking they'll ask for this much, and again, there's a mismatch between what they need and what they're asking for. But that all comes down to just be open and honest, and don't compromise your credibility, because that's the one thing that you're standing up front of, and people, that's what they judge you on the most, right? I mean, when we look at people pitch, you know, the business plan is one thing, but the Q&A is so important. It's how you answer the Q&A, how adept you are on your feet when you're asking a question. You know, it's like anybody, like a politician, right? I mean, you know how you're watching all the people do interviews, right? And when they ask pointed questions from CNN, you can just sort of tell how they answer. I mean, do you trust this person? Do they have credibility? That's, I think that's the biggest mistake, is compromising the one biggest asset you have, which is you and your knowledge and capabilities.
Who is the best contact in Ben Franklin for FabNet and for the Energy Hub?
Yeah, Mark Traybolt.
Mark.
Mark Traybolt, for sure.
Speaking about the budget, you said that, you submit, the portion that you're asking from Ben Franklin, and then where you're getting the rest of the match. But in the same cycle, if you are trying to do a chicken or an egg, where you're using some of the credibility you just went through, how do you put down that you're going to get the rest from investors, but you're waiting for Ben Franklin, or looking to coincide with the Ben Franklin investment to go get the rest of the investors?
Well, as part of the proposal, we'll ask you to send what we call a commitment letter. Commitment letter is just, I don't know how valuable the commitment letter is. It basically says, I won't get any Ben Franklin money until I get the rest of the match, and I commit that I will not take the money unless I have all those pieces in place. So it's okay to derive a budget speculating where the other dollars come in, but if those other dollars come in, you're sort of committing that you couldn't do the deal anyway, because you haven't fulfilled your obligation to make those other things happen.
Okay. And one follow-up is the timing. It's every quarter. So have we missed this quarter entry already, or how does that?
Well, no, I think we always do the briefings just in advance of the call for proposals, and I don't keep all the dates on top of my mind, but I do believe that the next submission, it's on our website, I do believe the next submission is just in a couple of weeks in July, right? I mean, is anybody following pretty closely?
I think IT was August 29th, but I heard that's rolling now. But
Well, Alan's trying to see if he can do that more compressed process a little bit. He'll take proposals anytime.
Right.
But I think the official call for proposals, I thought, was sometime third week of July.
I just know on the IT side, one just closed the 29th of June, and then I think the next one's August
Okay.
29th or 30th,
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
But it's all that's on the website. I don't commit the dates to memory, but it's there for sure. And if I'm in the office, I can pull it up if you have a hard time finding it on the web. Yes.
Can you explain the short loan period approval process? And then if that goes well, does that help you in the second process?
With the follow-on?
Yeah, so I think you said the 50,000 was the TAF.
The TAF, yeah.
And what that approval process is like in
comparison to the other one.
Yeah.
And then if you lead it across into, okay, it did generate what we thought, and now we're ready to go to the next level.
Yeah, no, the idea of the TAF is hopefully getting to reduce, let's say, technology risk so that you're positioned to come for a regular investment. That's the theory. So with the TAF, because it's only 50,000, we don't do the same amount of due diligence. We won't engage that same due diligence review. So the TAF, I can, remember I have both my technical advisory meeting, it's the Shark Tank 1 and Shark Tank 2. I'll do TAFs in either one of those, and that one meeting alone will be enough to supplement. So I can do up to 8 TAFs a year. I think Alan will do up to 8. So the process for TAF should be no more than 8 weeks. Should be very rapid.
And does that help you in the next, if now it did work, 6 months, you're where you thought you would be, to come back and do the regular?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true.
Okay.
Okay. So yes, if you're, like I said, if you say you're going to do A, B, or C, and you do A, B, or C, you're very well positioned to always ask for more money, not just from us, for anybody else. But I can tell you, I can say unequivocally, in my years of Ben Franklin, I've not had one company that hit its business plan, ever. Ever.
What? I'm sorry?
Never hit its business plan, ever. Hit a business plan. No one ever hit a business plan. I mean, basically, everything you tell me in your business plan, I discount because I know that you're not going to hit your business plan. Well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, there's always going to be the first company that does it. But I have tens and tens of companies that say they're going to do this, this, and this. The revenue's going to be this, this, and this. Not one has ever hit that initial target. So if you actually come in and you say what you're going to do and do what you're going to say, you're a rare beast, and you'll have no trouble raising money. I guarantee it. The hardest thing is going to be, you say you're going to do A, B, or C, and you kind of got part of A done, you forgot about B, and C is like, I'm not even getting a C, and now the hardest thing is making a case to say why you didn't get A, B, or C, you only got part of A. That's more routine, and that's we see that far more. Doesn't mean it's still not good to do, but it's hard to, you guys are doing hard things. It's hard to create a business. It's really hard. If you were pessimistic, you wouldn't be sitting here. I mean, I know in fact, I can tell you almost unequivocally, for even successful entrepreneurs that I've met, you know what's a recurring thing they tell you after the fact, it's successful ones. They all say, if I had known, honestly, if I had known how hard this was going to be, I don't know if I would have ever done this. And those are the ones that are successful. They say, if I knew how hard it was going to be to get here today, I don't know if I would have done it, man. But I think once you're in it, you're just in it, and you're passionate about it. You're in it. You want it, and And I can't speak to this. I don't know if there are mothers out there, right? So if there are mothers, the pregnancy is not easy and giving birth is painful, but yet a lot of times they do it again, right? So you kind of think, why would I do this again? It really was painful. Same thing with entrepreneurs. I mean, they get to the point and they say, I forget all the pain. It was just, I don't know if I'd ever want to go through it again, but when you're going through the process, you just do it. So anyway, my tip is hit your milestones. You won't worry about money at all. Yes.
What sources of funding are acceptable that Ben Franklin will match?
I think we will match any kind of money except for money you might also get from other sources in Pennsylvania. So sometimes they might have in the state certain kind of grant or other programs. I don't think they want to kind of double dip if you get something within Pennsylvania, but you can match SBIRs, you can match angel investments, you can match venture investments, friends and family money, loans, whatever. So almost anything counts. If it's cash, it's counted as a match.
Okay. Would revenue count?
Yes. So I didn't mention that because, if you do have revenue and you're a post-revenue company, you can say that part of my budget is going to come from operations. So yes, revenue counts as a match. And here's the other thing, and Alan and I will disagree on this because a lot of Alan's companies are just getting started. So if you raise money and you need money, you raise money. That's considered a watershed event. Everybody, and it's like we talked about, such and such a company just raised $3 million in venture funds. And it's like, hurrah, they raised $3 million. I'm on the opposite ilk. If you raise $3 million, what it means to me is you can't pay your bills. You need someone else to pay your bills for you. That's why you're getting that kind of money. So if you can actually pay your own bills by your own operations, I think that's what a business is about, right? You can't forever just use other people's money. You have to start having operations pay for yourself. So yes, if you have revenues from operations, that's a good thing. That's what businesses should be doing. Now, if you raise money to grow, I mean, the other stories, I mean, again, if you have a growth proposition where you need other people's money to grow, that's cool. But remember, you can't forever be using other people's money. You know, that's not a business. That's, I don't know, it's a hobby or something. I'm not sure what that is.
You mentioned Alan, is that Alan Frank?
Alan Krauss.
Ross.
Alan Krauss. And then there should be contact information in the packet.
And Jen?
Hart. Hart. 2 T's.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Without getting too specific, because I understand each company will get different terms, but if there's no penalty for prepayment, but there are these warrants, do those warrants go away when you prepay, or are those stay in effect for?
Yes. Good question. They're decoupled. So the loan, prepayment of the loan is different than the warrants. The warrants is a little piece of equity. So that is evergreen, if you will. I mean, it's an ownership piece. That could certainly be retired. I mean, we have some companies say we'll propose to buy out your ownership stake for A, B, or C. And so we've done deals where we're taken out. But no, those are decoupled. And remember, could I ask you, and I'll retrieve a pen, or if you have a pen there, if you sign in and you want all this electronically instead of that paper copy, definitely sign in, please, and then just put a note. We'll send you all that electronically. If you don't want, again, the paper copies are still not necessarily easily legible and readable. What worries you the most? What intrigues you the most? Anything that comes to mind?
Can you run down percentages about how many people send you summaries, how many people come through the application process, how many people run into the numbers? Just big round numbers on an annual basis.
And it's a frequent question, and I always answer it. It's just strange. I always answer it by, I don't know if you remember the comedian Stephen Wright. He's a droll comedian. I remember him. Stephen Wright once said that 96.7% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So with that in mind, I'm going to do the same thing. So I would say it's a harder question to think, because remember the executive summary part? If people send us an executive summary, they might catch us at a meeting or conference, and they'll pitch an idea, and we might say to them, listen, here's some things I see that could be some warts, but then they never submit. So do you count them as a statistic or not? Because they never really went into the process. Because they sort of were intercepted at the gate, and they decided just to self-eliminate from coming in at that particular time. Doesn't mean they don't come back in after they worked on things. But I think for the companies that come in, maybe about a third, 35%, if I remember the numbers, will make it through on the first time. But then companies, and Joe can tell you, I mean, we don't tell a company just no. We hopefully provide them feedback and say, here's some things that we saw. Maybe you can work on those kind of things. And then companies can come back and repitch. So it's never one and done. So that's why it's a little convoluted on the statistics. So some people come in second or third time, they've added the board of directors, they've added their advisors, they changed the business model, and then they got funding. So it's a little harder question than you might think, nuanced, but I'd say, let's say, 30, 40% maybe first time through.
I want a little more philosophical in nature, but I teach public speaking at the university, and I'm intrigued by your what you said about credibility. Your biggest asset is your own credibility, and someone needs the ability when they come to you to stand there and be able to answer questions on the spot and be really good and big in person. What advice would you give to someone who's got the great ideas, who isn't good in person, or who isn't good on the spot, but has the right stuff otherwise? It's a really good question. I'm trying to think on the spot here. Or you would talk to a little bit about, the having the right advisors and your board of directors. Would you say get somebody else to pitch your product? Or?
Here are a number of examples. First thing I'd say is we see some really good technical people that have a great idea that just maybe shouldn't be CEO. So one of the things we tell them is say, maybe you could be the chief technology officer, you could be chief of product development, but there are people out there that are willing to come in and be a CEO. Some CEOs at the early stage, they're only there to pitch for money. I mean, some people are really good at pitching for money. So remember, CEO is not evergreen. I mean, you see that in papers in big companies all the time, right? So there are people who come in who are serial entrepreneurs that can say, I'm going to run this company. I know that I'm not going to be there forever, but I'm here to get you from here to here. But part of there to there is to get money, and I'm really good at getting money. And I can pitch you. You can be there. You can answer the technical questions, but that's probably the main mechanism. The second thing is, I mean, there are some entrepreneurs who maybe not really great pitching, but a few of them, there's enough earnestness to the entrepreneurs. The investors might say, listen, I'm willing to invest, but I'm going to insert myself and actually help you. So they'll actually kind of backfill some of the skills. But you might not have to bring in a CEO, but your investors are being de facto board and management team. They help you. But I'd say the easiest thing is to recruit someone who's just really good at getting money. Because, and I hate to say it, and it's really sad, because there are really smart people that if they don't pitch well, it just doesn't engender the confidence in investors. And it's the human dynamics are just as important as the fundamentals of the business. And maybe that's the unfortunate part of this whole game.
Well, that's what I see in my classes, all the people who come through, because I always see them in front of the audience, and it's like, I'll look at somebody, I'm like, boy, they don't seem very bright, and then I look, they got a 4.0 average, they graduated first from high school, in their class, and it's like, no, they just can't present themselves in a way that's credible.
And I actually, I try to be a little more lenient to those kind of companies, where I'll try to look through that and say the underlying bones of your business, the underlying DNA is really strong. It's just not coming across well. But the problem I have is they're not getting the match money. So I might say I'm willing to put in mine, but they never get the match from someone else. So I have had, and I'll tell you, and I'll give you real examples, not naming companies. I've had companies that on paper, when I read the proposals, I say, I can't wait to see this company, and they came in and they bombed. I've had other ones who have seen the proposal and said, oh, no one's going to like this. They came in and wowed everybody. And so it was just amazing that I would have, my predictions based on what I read going in were very, very different. And that human dynamic, you just can't underplay it. If investors have confidence in you, it's huge. It's huge. Because then they know, they are willing. The confidence manifests itself when things go bad. When things go bad, are they in for the pain? Are they in for that next little bit of capital when things go bad? If you don't have that dynamic, as things go bad, they might say, "Oh, thanks, I gave it a try, it doesn't work, shake hands, go away." But you want people that are willing to ride you through the times when you don't hit that business plan, where you need a little more capital, and that's where the dynamic comes in.
Are the typical presentations just one person, or is it the team? How?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And you are?
I'm Jesse Pearsall. I do special events here.
Okay, and for Jesse's point, it's sort of similar. I always tell people when you pitch, and could you, before you leave, could you sign in? Oh, did you? Okay. What I always tell people is you bring as many people as you can to reinforce the message you want to give. So I mean, you can bring one person, you can bring in 8. They might not all. I think one of the most compelling things is bring in a co-investor. You bring in the management team, you bring in a co-investor. What more powerful thing can you have in front of a group of other investors than having this person say, here's why I put in my money, this is why I support that company. That's really powerful. You bring in a customer. Customer says, here's why I'm buying Janelle's product. This is just amazing. I mean, how more powerful you get when you bring in those kind of voices into that meeting where it's not just the management team pitching. So there's no rules of who you bring in. The rules are, I always say the rules are, you're asking us to part with our money, or you're asking anybody to part with their money. You've got to make whatever pitch you can to have them actually part with their money. There's no rules about that.
Is it better at those meetings? Where would that be more important?
Well, the first meeting is the technical gate, maybe less so. The investor gate, certainly more so. Because that's, I think, the more demanding of the two. There's the second gate. The second gate is where people feel they're gatekeepers for Ben Franklin's money. And so they tend to be, they just tend to be, they view themselves as gatekeepers. So it's kind of like, you convince me this is good. Convince me why we should fund you. The technologists always rally for other technologists. I mean, it's more a fraternal community than I think the investor community.
Quick question, who's the contact for TAF?
For TAF, for life sciences or what kind of, for IT or what?
Anything both.
Okay, you know what, I would say Mark Traybold, again, would be great to contact for TAF. Mark Traybold from the Technology Commercialization Group. Okay, he'd be good TAF resource.
Is that true also for the physical sciences?
Yeah, so you can contact me, but Mark is also, the portfolio of TAF loans is going to be managed by the Technology Commercialization Group, so Mark will ultimately own that portfolio anyway. So he's a good resource, but I can help as well.
Just wanted to clarify the process one last time. The submission of the executive summary is the first step, obviously. But
Optional, but yes, optional.
do you recommend talking to yourself or Alan or somebody first for feedback, or is that only after this?
Case by case. I met with Jason yesterday, right?
Okay.
And so we spent 2 hours, and I told him it basically takes the place of an executive summary, because I learned more in our discussion yesterday than it would have by a 2-page document. And I can guarantee you, he has no hell of an idea what a Rolodex is, so he was kidding on that. You don't, do you?
No, I do.
Okay. But
Thanks for
Alan,
reverting back to that.
yeah, but Alan might say, just send me the executive summary first. My portfolio is so eclectic, I like to meet with companies, because it's actually my first stage of due diligence. I get to talk to someone, look in the eye, ask them some of our questions. I'm sort of asking some of the questions I might anticipate them being asked. So for me, I do like that meeting, but I think Alan, for the IT world, a lot of times you're not making something, you're not manufacturing something, so you can get started a little faster, less capital needs. So I think Alan could be overwhelmed by people with concepts. He sort of said, just send me something, I'll read it first. So again, it's case by case. Jen likes to meet people as well and talk to them. So the best thing I would do is send an executive summary and say, if you think it's worth getting a little of my time, I'm willing to do that. The reason I like to talk to companies is sometimes if they're actually going to make something, I'll go visit their plants or their offices, because I get a sense of what they're actually doing, right? I mean, is the space suitable for what they want to do, things like that. So it's a convoluted answer, but it's the best guidance I give you.
Thanks.
Personal question. As far as what you do, how did you come to do it?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I failed at everything else, I guess. No, I mean, sort of I worked in a large company background, sort of a generalist, what do they call it? Not an expert in a lot of different things, but kind of like
The Renaissance?
yeah, the Renaissance man. So, when we had some downturns in that business, I was looking around for opportunities, and I thought this just sort of fell out of the sky, and I said, geez, this is great because I had some experience in doing financial stuff, technology stuff. Maybe the hybrid of this, maybe a generalist would do this job pretty well compared to other jobs. I think what I learned is it's hard to be a generalist at a large company because they want a specific talent. They really don't want generalists. They want someone who's good at this, and they'll hire someone who's good at that, hire someone who's good at that. But small business entrepreneur world generalists can do, I think, a little bit better until you have enough jobs that you have that differentiation. I think.
Yeah, I have a kind of like a high-level ecosystem question. Philadelphia has cultivated a very huge bootstrapping culture as a result of kind of a widespread acceptance that seed investment or seed stage funding is high risk and generally very kind of limited opportunities as it appears in the city. So how do you guys view it as it relates to other, maybe comparing it to other ecosystems in the United States? And kind of what are we doing, or what can we do as a culture of startups and maybe a culture of investors to bring on new opportunities for potentially very high-risk companies, but also very high-reward companies?
Yeah. I'm not the IT investor. A lot of the bootstrapping comes from sort of maybe the digital or IT kind of companies. So I can't state with a lot of experience, but what I've heard is a couple things. Number one, what I've heard is certainly for capital, Philadelphia needs to do better and better to get more capital in the region. Okay, so compared to other regions in the country, we don't have as abundant amount of capital. But from a bootstrapping standpoint, I've actually heard from a lot of entrepreneurs that Philly is really a good place. It's a very supportive culture. It's really a good place to be. It's not a cutthroat culture. You can go to, there's all these places where people get together, they share ideas, they build on each other's ideas, and to the benefit of everybody. So I've heard a lot of younger companies say, Philadelphia is just, the culture is really cool. We'd love to have a little more capital, but if we can keep doing what we have, I mean, people feel real comfortable just sharing ideas and building up each other. So I think we have some really good DNA there around the culture, and it's just that, supplementing a little more capital would help. But people have really said, man, Philadelphia, I love being here. It's not as, I'm finding people that I can interact with. They're open. We share things, and they're waxed eloquently about why Philadelphia is a great place to be as a young entrepreneur.
Do you feel like our longevity as a culture that is accepting and open could beget some investment capital going forward in our kind of maturity as a startup?
I mean, that's the hope and the dream. I think how do you do that is it's building a wall brick by brick. I mean, you have some good companies, good exits. It attracts more capital, so it's a virtuous cycle. It probably doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
But if Philadelphia is seen, I think it's being seen as a place where some really neat businesses are germinating, those things will happen. It's just that the time frame is probably slower than everybody would love, but these things happen over time.
Totally. What's your favorite round that you guys announced? I think BioBox was in it. Who is your favorite right now? And you're in the physical sciences.
Yeah. What's my favorite?
Maybe you don't have a favorite, but who are you excited about?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's interesting. In my portfolio, I like a company that they solved a really hard problem. They're applying that problem to multi-unit dwellings and apartments. So what they can go in is they put these little sensors in that can measure water usage very granularly, like at a toilet level, sink level, shower level. And so then an apartment building owner can now actually charge for those utilities, the water utilities directly, because you can monitor usage. But more importantly, because you can monitor usage, you could detect when there's leaks. Because again, if you're in an apartment, you usually don't care whether your toilet's leaking. Your landlord does, you might not. So from a landlord standpoint, they get to actually see whether or not water is actually leaking. It's not efficient. So it's a sustainable technology. It gets to and what they found is water usage goes down around 25% in those buildings when you can actually monitor for leaks or usage or whatever. So it's a way to get sustainable that really does work without asking people to do things. If people have to pay for what they're using, it turns out that they're far more economical. So what the problem they solved is, if you have 100 apartments in a building, how do you get all these sensors to talk to each other and get the information out to the outside world? So the problem they solved is a really elegant mesh radio network that's all the radios speak to each other, eventually gets to an outside portal, and then that data is used by the building owner.
Is that considered ag tech?
Is it considered
ag tech? Does it have agricultural applications that farmers or people could use because of sensory data?
I think because the granularity for a toilet or shower use is so small compared to ag, I think ag would have other sensors for much larger use of water, so probably just a different market.
Okay.
But
what's the name of that company?
It's called H2O Degree.
Okay.
So it's cool. The other, I'll tell you, the one company that I think should be busting it out, which is also my portfolio, it shows you why things sometimes don't always work as well as planned. I mean, we have another company called UGMO, UGMO. They developed a sensor that can be buried underground that actually tells in real time the temperature, salinity, and moisture of soil. So for irrigation purposes, you would know when you have to water, not on a timer basis, because you can actually measure in the soil when the soil demand for water is high. So for California now, in places where water is being rationed, maybe that's going to be the uptick in their business, because you can keep plants healthy without overwatering them, and that could be a big concern. Yes?
Can you explain when so you submit your executive summary, when the other services or help that you point us to, how that would work? So you said the partnerships or push you in the right direction. How's that work?
Immediately. So if there's things you need, Mark Trabel or Shri or someone from the technology commercialization group, you can start interacting with them independent of being with the investment group.
Just one follow-up question. The 200, 250 is your average general investment, but what is that? Is that across all sectors, or is it, there's different amounts in each sector, the IT sector? Is that usually less?
Yes.
Do you have an average on that?
I don't. You have to ask Alan.
Okay.
And I can sort of say, and I mean, I know there's a lot of IT companies, so like, you know, I have a lot of companies that make stuff, so the capital needs for making stuff is high. So I always say in sort of a joking way that for an IT company, right? I mean, the capital needs, you have 2 people, 2 computers, parents' basement, 16 cases of Mountain Dew. That's all you need, right? That's it.
That would be nice.
Right? So, you know, so the capital needs for that are very, very small compared to machinery to build and make stuff. And so I think for Alan's IT companies, I think he does a lot of like $100,000 deals, but $100,000 can go a long way for an IT company, maybe compared to a company that has to build and make stuff. So yeah, it's different, but so it's a good observation. Alan might know his numbers far better than I do. Yes?
Going back to partnerships again, I'm an intellectual property attorney. How would I become involved as one of the partners?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're always looking for good partners who are called service providers. We're actually working on this year trying to build a sort of a preferred supplier network, which is basically a group of, it could be accountants, CFOs, intellectual property attorneys, business attorneys, but people that have either worked with our companies that we know, and we can sort of have a database of folks who are, you know, who we could point to and say, listen, companies have a good experience with these folks, or we know them well, and they're one of our preferred providers. So we should talk more about that, and you know, and how you get on that as it's being developed, this whole preferred provider network.
Well, maybe now will be a good time to kind of open it up for talking to each other, networking, and potentially one-on-ones if you want to stay any longer. Thanks, Mark, for coming in, and thank you, everyone.
Look forward to a lot of great proposals, so can't wait to see them and hear about them.
And if you haven't signed in, make sure you sign in.
And again, if you know, I didn't talk a lot about Ben Franklin, but this gives, you know, performance profiles talks about the companies in which we invested. And the other one is kind of our, you know, how it's kind of more general on who we are and what we do. So these are, I think they're really well done, and I think it's, I'm going to leave these.
All right.